This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. Having broken into the vault of the library at the monastery of Inisquin, the companions began to search for the information on the whereabouts of the 5 jewels. Running against time, Valen and Talion poured through the manuscripts, whilst Beric and Canute removed the carcass of the rock beetle from the crypt and cleared any evidence of their battle before the monks rose for matins. The companions recovered the information they sought, returning to the guest house before they could be discovered, though it was only a matter of time before Abbot Wiglaf would learn the vault had been disturbed. The next morning, at the monastery's guest house, the party recounted their night's work to Brannock, and Valen told the companions what he and Talion had learned, that the jewels, known as the Hellstones, each have a power relating to one of the 5 dark gods. Valen also revealed that 3 of the 5 had already been taken by Reynard of Harburg, the leader of the Brethren of the Purifying Light, as well as the last known location and keeper of the remaining 2. The monks, Cadfael and Ranulf, arrived, and to keep up appearances, Lena left with Ranulf for the monastery's library. Meanwhile, Cadfael reported that Abbot Wiglaf suspected the companions had entered the vault, and encouraged them to leave the Blessed Isle as soon as possible. But just as the monk turned to Brannock, suggesting that they departed for Trevenid as agreed, Cadfael had some kind of seizure, which caused him to collapse. Chapter 38, Part 1, Day 38, Midday. Party status: Beric, 36 out of 37 hit points. Lena, 26 out of 26 hit points. Valen, 17 out of 17 hit points. Talion, 21 out of 21 hit points. Canute, 23 out of 24 hit points. Jenna, 6 out of 6 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Soothe, and Revive. Talion has memorized Poetic Prose, Resolve, and Pitch. Lena can pray for 1 first-level miracle and 2 second-level miracles. Only the sound of birdsong outside broke the silence, as the companions looked on, dumbfounded. One moment, Cadfael had been speaking to Brannock. The next, he was laying motionless upon the boarded floor, where the table's contents were scattered about, having been knocked over as the old monk had fallen. Jenna was first to come to her senses. She quickly moved to kneel down beside Cadfael, placing her fingers to his neck.
His heart beats not.
Her voice trailed off. Without thinking, she fumbled at the neck of her tunic. She took hold of her holy symbol with her left hand, whilst placing her right upon Cadfael's chest.
Naya,
she said softly,
I beseech thee, hear my prayer.
Then closing her eyes, she spoke aloud.
Mother of light, keeper of death, wrap us in thy sweet caress. Hold us in sleep, that we may dream, in thy realm of in-between. Show us thy love, take not our breath, for we may still have paths to tread. Strengthen our hearts, heal our pain, that we may praise thee again and again. Bestow us thy power, that we may become thy will shall be done. So let it be, now and for eternity.
Nothing happened, and time seemed to stand still. Yet Jenna's expression bore nothing but reverence, humility, and supplication. Then her eyes became wide, and a look of sublime rapture spread upon her face.
Lady,
she exclaimed. Jenna's hand, the one placed upon Cadfael's chest, began to shake uncontrollably, until her whole arm was trembling with some unseen energy. The novitiate cried out, as if in both pleasure and pain, until suddenly a white light flashed down her arm. Cadfael's body jolted violently, and Jenna was thrown back. For a moment, the companions looked on. Then suddenly, without warning, Cadfael took a sharp, gasping breath, and Jenna's life had changed forever. Cadfael has been poisoned with an extract of hemlock by the agent installed at the monastery by Reynard of Harburg, and on the orders of Wiglaf. Not only does the abbot suspect Cadfael of helping the companions infiltrate the vault, the abbot also sees the companions acting on behalf of Lord Colwyn, so murdering Cadfael would mean that the monk could not return with Brannock to Trevenid, leaving Lady Neve's life in peril. Fortunately, I rolled Cadfael's save versus death off Mike, and he passed. Although given the monk's age, I decided that it would be interesting narratively for the poison to have induced a cardiac arrest. Given Cadfael passed his saving throw, I ruled that in this medical emergency, a miracle of cure-light wounds would be enough to restore the monk's normal heart function, providing that a minimum of 3 hit points were restored. With Lena absent, this gave me an opportunity for Jenna to pray for her first miracle, since the young woman has been due a level up since episode 36. I rolled Jenna's prayer roll off Mike, which was a success, and I rolled 6+1 for the hit points restored. Lucky for Cadfael. Now whilst Jenna is still an NPC, I have neglected her level up, so let's not delay any further. Rolling a d6 for new hit points. A 6! Wow! The newly blessed cleric's hit points rise to 12. Now to see if she will benefit from any ability score increases. Strength 3. Intelligence 5. Wisdom 5. Dexterity. A 6! Jenna's dexterity increases to 9, removing her previous penalty to armor class. Constitution 5. And Charisma. Another 6! The cleric's charisma increases to an impressive 15, which perhaps reflects her growing confidence, although this does not change her reaction roll bonus. Okay, well it remains to be seen what Jenna's future will hold. She is slowly coming to terms with her ordeal at Carodu, and she has become a stronger, more determined woman as a result. She has a desire to seek justice, and hold Adric and Reynard to account, as well as her tutor in Porthcullen, Brother Yoan, who as we heard back in episode 33, may have some association with the Brethren of the Purifying Light. And there is no doubt that she and Lena have an affinity. At the same time, she may wish to leave the nightmare of her recent past behind, and I think that given what he has seen, Brannock would be happy to take the cleric back to Castle Trevenid, or maybe even Healthstone, as Father Osbert cannot be in both places, and a new priest is required for one or the other. I think it's time to let the Oracle decide. The question is, will Jenna part company with the companions and go with Brannock? A 3. That's a no but. Well, that tells me that for now, Jenna sees her path with the companions, in which case she will soon need to get some proper equipment if she is going to survive in their company. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. We need to see if the companions can uncover the foul play regarding Cadfael's attempted murder. I have created a number of clues which could all help lead the PCs to determine the following. A. That Cadfael was poisoned. B. Who the assassin is and upon whose orders they acted. And C. That the assassin has a connection to the Brethren of the Purifying Light. To start with, given his knowledge of herb lore, I'm going to make a wisdom check for Valen to see if he makes a connection to Cadfael's collapse. The mage needs to roll an 11 or less. A 9. Next, as the character with the highest intelligence, I'll make a check for Valen to see whether he remembers the monk who was clearing the hemlock in the pasture back in episode 34. Valen will need to roll a 17 or less. A 17, on the money. There is more to uncover, but I think that's enough for now. Let's get back to the story. Chapter 38, Part 2, Day 38, Afternoon. Party status. The party status is unchanged, except that Jenna now has 12 out of 12 hit points. The monastery's bell tolled in the distance, as the companions tried to make sense of what had just happened. After he had been revived, they had put Cadfael to rest in the dormitory, where the old monk had slept for a couple of hours, with Jenna watching over him. After, Beric had lit the hearth, despite the summer weather, and Cadfael now sat by it, sipping a cup of nettle infusion prepared by Valen. If it were possible, the monk looked even more drawn than he had before, but at least he was no longer deathly pale. He looked at Jenna and weakly smiled.
I owe you my life, my dear.
Jenna smiled softly, but then replied with genuine humility.
It was not I. Our Lady Naya deemed that it was not your time.
You received the word? Well, that indeed fills my weak old heart with gladness. You have been truly blessed.
Then added poignantly,
Sister.
The newly recognised cleric blushed.
Thank you, brother.
Have you experienced such a trauma before? Valen asked.
Never. Despite my age, I have ever been hale.
The mage nodded slowly. Have you taken anything to eat or drink today? What think you? Beric interrupted. Cadfael looked over at the warrior.
Your Wayland friend suspects I have been poisoned.
Then he turned back to Valen.
Am I right?
Yes. In my homeland, certain criminals are executed by means of poisoned hemlock. In the right quantity, it induces a seizure and stops the heart, just as you experienced. Who would want you dead? Beric asked the monk.
Wiglaf, of course. Long have I been a thorn in his side. The abbot is no fool, and he no doubt suspects that I have aided you.
Then turning back to the mage, he replied,
I had just a little bread and ale, not long before I came here.
Did you notice anything unusual about the taste? Cadfael's eyes briefly flicked up in thought.
Come to think of it, the ale had a slight aroma of parsley.
Valen nodded. Parsley and hemlock were of the same family of plants. The mage considered for a moment. Yesterday, when we arrived at Innisquin, there was a monk clearing hemlock in the pasture. A dark-haired man with an aquiline nose. Cadfael looked at Valen and sighed.
That would be Brother Aldwin.
At that moment, the door opened, and Elena walked in with Ranulf, returning from the library. The cleric looked at the companions, and then at Cadfael, and instantly knew that something was amiss. What is it? What has happened? Okay, so the companions have established that Cadfael was poisoned, and that Brother Aldwin is a potential suspect. But so far, the evidence is circumstantial at best. Now Wiglaf mistakenly believes Ranulf to be his lapdog, and arrogantly treats the Skarne with much disdain. But as we already established in episode 34, Ranulf does not support the abbot, and he is in fact the eyes and ears of Cadfael. There are 3 pieces of information which could further point suspicion in Brother Aldwin's direction. Like any small community, secrets are hard to keep, so I'm going to ask the Oracle if Ranulf has any knowledge of them. The first will reveal if Brother Aldwin had an opportunity to administer the poison into Cadfael's ale. A 5, that's a straight yes. The second will point to where the poison was prepared. A 6, that's a yes and. Finally, we heard back in episode 33 that Ranulf escorted Reynard of Harburg to the abbot's chambers, and it's safe to assume that he was also nearby when the Brethren leader departed. On that basis, did he see Reynard talking to anyone else during the cleric's time at Innisquin? And if so, who was it? A 6, that's another yes and. Okay then. Chapter 38, Part 3, Day 38, Late Afternoon. Party status. The party status is unchanged. The late afternoon sun dappled through the leaves as Ranulf led the companions through the small woodland. Like everywhere on the Blessed Isle, the copse was well maintained. There was a predominance of grey willow and silver birch, many of which bore the evidence of coppicing, and the ground scrub had been managed to encourage a variety of edible plants, from blackberries to mushrooms and wild garlic. After the companions had relayed the events to Lena and Ranulf, the big monk had told them that Brother Aldwin had been sent by Wiglaf to work in the kitchen that morning, after Brother Sigbert, who usually worked there, had been taken ill. Not only that, but the day before, Aldwin had been seen carrying a sack and heading towards the brew house, to which Ranulf now led them.
I have just remembered,
the big monk announced.
2 weeks hence when the bald cleric came to see the abbot.
Reynard of Harburg? Lena asked.
Yes.
Ranulf confirmed.
I saw him cross the cloister speaking with Brother Aldwin. I thought nothing of it at the time, but now I come to think of it, it seemed they were acquainted.
How so, brother?
Canute asked.
Because they did something odd.
What was it?
They both rolled up their left sleeve and clasped each other on the forearm.
The companions gave each other knowing looks. How long has Aldwin been a monk here? Lena asked.
More than 2 years. He arrived not long after I took my vows.
Ranulf glanced at Canute, but the Northman's expression was unreadable. Do you remember who sponsored him? Lena asked, referring to the custom for novitiates to enter the church.
It was Wiglaf, as I recall. That was before he came abbot. The old abbot. Leiston died not long after.
How did he die? Beric asked. A realization passed over the big monk's face.
His heart failed.
Somewhere nearby, a magpie chattered in alarm, as suddenly a black cat dashed from a nearby bush, a fledgling dangling from its mouth. It froze, staring at the companions momentarily, before running off with its prize. Ranulf laughed and shook his head.
If only he were as good at catching mice.
He reflected. Presently, the path began to follow a fast-running stream, and not long after, the woodland gave way to a field containing a cluster of single-storey wattle and daub buildings with thatched roofs. One was windowless, whose entrance was shut by big barn-like doors. The other two could have easily been houses, only much larger, and one showed signs of use, as wisps of smoke gently drifted out of the mullioned windows.
That's the brew house,
Ranulf said, pointing to the building in use.
The other is the bakery, and that's the granary.
He explained, then turned to the companions.
I must leave you now. The abbot will be wondering where I am.
The big monk nodded farewell, then turned and walked back towards the wood. After 10 yards or so, Ranulph called back.
Oh, and the brewer's name is Brother Friok.
Time to throw a little chaos into the mix. As you have probably discerned, Aldwin is the Brethren agent, sent by Reynard of Harburg to murder the old abbot and engineer Wiglaf's ascension to the role. Since then, he has acted behind the scenes as Wiglaf's enforcer, ensuring that those monks who do not toe the line with the abbot's policies are for the most part kept compliant by means of blackmail or bribery. Some of course have been immune to corruption, most notably Cathrail, and Aldwin has been slowly dealing with them by using more terminal methods. So I want to establish which camp Brother Friok falls into. A simple roll on a d6 should do it. On a 1 to 2, Friok is one of Wiglaf's firm supporters, and may himself have been recruited into the Brethren of the Purifying Light. On a 3 to 4, Friok is being blackmailed or bribed into towing the line. And on a 5 or 6, Friok is openly opposed to Wiglaf. Here is the roll. A 6? Well then, does this mean that Aldwin has taken some action against the monk? Let's ask the Oracle. A 5, that's a straight yes. Okay, so is Aldwin currently at the brewhouse? A 6, that's a yes and. And finally, is Brother Friok already dead? Okay then. If the noise of the stream that burbled nearby had not been so loud, then the companions may have noticed earlier that something was out of turn. But as it was, they were almost by the door when they first heard the sound of disturbance from within. Beric wasted no time. Running forward, he flung open the door, but the contrast of the bright sunlight outside and the natural gloominess of the brewhouse's interior meant the warrior could not discern anything other than vague shapes within. He stepped over the threshold into a room filled with steam, smoke, and the rich aroma of yeast and herbs. Lined against the walls were a number of barrels and also sacks, some of which were open, exposing the grain within. Hanging from the beams were a variety of dried herbs used to flavour the ale, and on a table to one side were a number of bowls and jugs. At one end, a docile-looking oxen was harnessed to a yoke, which in turn was connected to a thick wooden pole through the centre of a millstone, used for grinding the grains, while in the centre of the room was an open-topped stone kiln where a fire burned, and set atop it was a wide copper pan in which a new batch of wort was bubbling. Beric took in his surroundings in an instant, for his attention was immediately drawn beyond the pan. There, a middle-aged monk was bound upon a chair, squirming and writhing, his eyes wide with terror, as another monk pitched his nose whilst pouring ale into his mouth from a jug. Hearing the door open, the man with the jug spun around. His cowl fell from about his head, revealing a mop of black hair. He had a long aquiline nose, and his pale blue eyes were full of cold malice. Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Now, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? And this episode has a wealth of contributions. Returning in the role of Jenna is Fiona K.T. Howard. Fiona is an improviser, actor and podcaster whose excellent shows What Am I Rolling and The GM's Book Club are well worth checking out. You can find Fiona via www.floco.com/page/FKTH. Also returning to the role of Cadfael is Dave Patterson. Dave is the host of the wonderful chimera that is the Frankenstein RPG podcast. Another returning talent, playing Ranulph, is Kevin Conyers. Kevin has a blog with all kinds of OSR goodness at floodedrealms.com. And finally, returning once again in the role of Canute is John Cohen, creator of Tale of the Manticore. I'll put these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I now have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. I'd also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone.
It's been 7 years since the masked court fell and the Empire began dying its final death. Once a member of the elite Imperial Special Service, now turned bounty hunter, Sejana Lushale fights for survival in a universe full of turmoil and confusion. She'll use her wits, her laser pistol, and the power of the Void to face the growing tension in the Cassidon system. This is Steve Morrison of the Errant Adventures podcast, and on this new season I'm using the tabletop RPG Traveler to bring to life my own space opera setting, full of bounty hunters, religious zealots, and people struggling to survive and find joy in the dying lights of an intergalactic empire. Join me for this new adventure, and welcome to Book 1, Meridian. I'll see you out in the deep.